Chair Edge, give us 10 seconds and we'll get going.
Okay.
Okay, Chair Edge, we are live.
Thank you, and good evening. I'd like to call the meeting to order and welcome you to the regular meeting of the Milwaukee Planning Commission. Agendas and additional copies of staff reports are available on the city website at www.milwaukeeoregon.gov. You may locate them by navigating to the community calendar where tonight's meeting page is posted. If you have not reviewed the agenda, please do so. It contains important information about the process. First is our native lands acknowledgement. City of Milwaukee respectfully acknowledges that our community is located on the ancestral homeland of the Clackamas people. In 1855, the surviving members of the Clackamas signed the Willamette Valley Treaty, also known as the Calapooia Treaty, with the federal government in good faith. We offer our respect and gratitude to the indigenous people of this land. I'd just like us to take a moment of silence to remember the Clackamas people and the native people of this area. Thank you. Moving on to the approval of the July 22nd and August 26th, 2025 meeting minutes. Does anyone have any corrections to make to either of those minutes that were distributed with the packet? Hearing none, I will entertain a motion to approve both sets of minutes as presented.
Motion to approve the minutes as presented.
Motion to approve. Do we have a second?
I will second the approval.
Thank you. We have a motion and a second. All those in favor say aye.
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 All opposed say nay. There were any abstentions? I didn't get a count on the room, so I wasn't sure if there was any abstentions. It sounds like it passed as presented. So I'd like to offer Vera a chance to both introduce herself as in her new position, but also introduce her new Planning Commission member.
Good evening, everyone. I checked the calendar. We haven't all met since the end of August. So summer is over and we're back. So welcome everyone. It's nice to see everyone here again. Again, Vera Coleus, the planning manager as of 4 weeks ago, former senior planner. And we have Will First is here. He's an assistant planner here with the department. He's been here 3 months. So welcome, Will. And I thought this would be a good opportunity to have our newest planning commissioner, Colin Steer, introduce yourself, and then we can go around to all of the commissioners and introduce yourself to Colin and maybe name, of course, how long you've maybe lived in Milwaukee, how long you've been on the commission. That's a little bit of get to know you, I guess. But Commissioner Steer, would you like to kick this off?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much, Vera, and congratulations again on your new role. So my name is Colin Steer. I use any pronouns. I've been living in the city of Milwaukee for 3 years now, almost 4. I moved here for work, originally from Phoenix, Arizona, and my background is mechanical engineering. I'm now a regional engineer for a stormwater company.
Suppose I'll just go down the line. My name is Max Panic. I use he and she pronouns. I've lived in Milwaukee for most of my life, with brief stints in Australia as well. Now I live right in downtown, loving every second of it. My background is in urban affairs, urban planning, and I work a lot in public health at the moment, primarily in the school setting. I've been on the Planning Commission for, is it just a year now? Almost a year, because I came in mid-cycle, so yeah, I think a year. Yeah.
Welcome. My name is Brian Lowther. I've been in Milwaukee for about 7 years. I have a structural drafting and design background. I work at a firm in downtown Portland. And been on the Planning Commission since March, so fairly new to it still. But yeah, nice to meet you and congratulations, Vera, and welcome, Will.
I'm Nick Hess. I joined the Planning Commission with Commissioner Lowther earlier this year. And yeah, born in Milwaukee, have been in and around the Milwaukee, Portland area for my whole life. Have recently been here for the last 5 years or so. And yeah, have been working in renewable energy for 18 years. Recently kind of took a change consulting in renewables and doing some local business consulting as well right now.
Vice Chair Graychick, would you like to go next?
Certainly. Thank you for that, Commissioner Chair Edge. My name is Lisa Graytrick. I am an architectural historian and historic preservationist by trade. I've been on the Planning Commission for a little over, since July actually of 2024. And I've lived in Milwaukee, Oak Grove area my entire life, except for the 6 years I spent in Eugene after high school.
Thank you. And then as for me, my name is Joseph Edge. I'm actually now the longest tenured member on the Planning Commission, running up on the end of my second term. I grew up in the Milwaukee, Oak Grove area and went to Milwaukee Junior High before it was the Waldorf School. And, really have been here, with a short stint in North Carolina during the Great Recession, have been basically in the area my entire life. And by trade, I am actually recently, very, very recently, days ago, promoted to principal software engineer at a global manufacturing automation company. I've been there for about 14 years, but the principal title is my own new recent change. But anyway, I've been, other than that, my interests are in, regional urban planning and, helping with, drafting, code to solve the code and policies to solve problems in the community. So that's my own little hobby. But I think that's it. Was there anything else, any other informational items, Vera, that you wanted to go over?
Thank you, Chair Edge. Yeah, if I could, just a couple of updates. As I'm sort of taking over this from Laura, so I'm going to try to create my own little methodology here, but a couple of updates. Last Saturday was the Umbrella Parade downtown. The lights are on the tree at a historical city hall, and it was a huge success. From what I understand, there were a lot of folks here, so it was a really great event. December 20th is the winter solstice and the Christmas ships event at Milwaukee Bay Park, so everyone's encouraged to attend. Check the city calendar for more information on that. And then I just wanted to give a couple of updates on some of the development projects that are happening in town. We had a lot of ribbon cuttings over the last month and a half in the city. The Short Stack Cottage Cluster Development at 3736 Southeast Harvey Street. I think that's pretty close to you, I think, Commissioner Steer. 15-unit cottage cluster. It's affordable housing. It's through Proud Ground. So affordable ownership units. So those are done and ready to go, and they're already selling the units. I think they're being marketed at $250,000 for those units. So really, it's a really great project. You probably are noticing what's happening at Hillside. So we have 3 buildings up as part of the Hillside Master Plan project for phase 1. So the 3 buildings that are under construction right now are phase 1. It's a total of 275 units between the 3 buildings. Building C is the one closest to 224. So that one is complete. Certificate of occupancy is done and folks are moving in. That's 100 dwelling units. 68 of those units are being priced at 30% AMI and the remainder are at 50% AMI. And that was the building that was focused primarily on folks that were relocated from the original Hillside development and moving back. I don't think it's everyone because some folks were relocated and have elected to stay in the units where they were relocated to, but it's great. And so we're moving pretty quickly on buildings A and B are moving forward, and permits have been submitted for phase 2, which are the buildings sort of in the middle of the site. So things are moving along really quickly, and it's a really great project if you get a chance to go by. They're doing really good work over there. And then finally, we had a ribbon cutting at Bonaventure, the senior living development off Rusk Road, and 224, 170 units of senior care and assisted living units there too. So there's a lot happening in the city right now. So, but that's all I have. Thank you, Chair Edge.
Thank you. It's exciting to see those developments getting certificates of occupancy. Because I remember certainly, participating in those hearings. So that's really cool to see those getting built finally. So we will move on to audience participation. I don't believe anyone is connected to Zoom, but is there anybody in the room, Vera?
Other than us, no one is here.
Okay, well then I will move on. So we will, the next agenda item is a Type 5 application for proposed amendments to the Milwaukee Municipal Code, Title 17 and Title 19, Land Division and Zoning. The public hearing on this Type 5 application for legislative amendments called to order. Purpose of this hearing is for the Commission's consideration of application number ZA-2025-004. Excuse me. If you are here to testify, please remember to confine your remarks to the application and the relevant criteria and to avoid repetition and information not relevant. Moderator may mute you if disruptions occur. The Planning Commission will make a recommendation to Council regarding whether the proposal conforms with all of the city's applicable criteria. Now ask staff to cite the zoning ordinance section or sections where the criteria can be found.
There are a lot of them. So try to go through them quickly. The main set of criteria and approval criteria for code amendments are found in section 9 or Milwaukee Municipal Code 19.902, amendments to maps and ordinances, and Milwaukee Municipal Code 19.1000, review procedures. The code sections that are affected by the proposed code amendments include various sections from Title 17 Land Division, and then various sections of the zoning ordinance, including chapters 19.200, 19.300, 19.400, 500, 600, and 900. So we're touching nearly the entire zoning code. But again, the approval criteria for the code amendments come out of 19.902, amendments to maps and ordinances, and 19.1000, review procedures.
Perfect, thank you. Does any member of the commission wish to abstain from this hearing? No. Okay. Does any member of the commission wish to declare an actual or potential conflict of interest? No. So hearing none, let's proceed to the staff report.
Okay, I'm just going to share my screen and get the presentation up. There we go. Okay. Hopefully everybody can see that. Okay, great. All right, again, Vera Coley's planning manager. I'm here to present the housekeeping code amendments. So as we talk about in the staff report, housekeeping amendments are minor code fixes, generally clarifications or minor changes. It is not intended to affect the meaning or intent of existing regulations and are not intended to be a change in policy. So we have our public hearing tonight. We have a tentatively scheduled hearing with the city council who will be the final decision makers in adopting the code amendments on January 20th. The full code commentary was posted with the 30-day notice as required, and that notice was posted both on the website. We posted it with DLCD and with Metro as required. And then we posted the public hearing notices paper form at City Hall, the Public Safety Building, the Johnson Creek facility, and the public library as well. Okay. All right. I think what I'd like to do, since there are so many sections, my goal was to kind of go through each slide sort of package of things. And if anybody has any questions, I'm going to remind myself to pause and ask if there are any questions before we move on. So I'll just start here with just sort of a general set of amendments throughout that you'll see where we're trying to replace the word shall with must or with will, where that is more appropriate. There are a few code sections as we went through the middle housing code where the old code did call out duplexes, but we missed the references and didn't include triplexes and quadplexes with it. So there are a couple different sections where I've added those words so that we're making sure that we're covering all of the middle housing sections where required. There were still some remnant references to the Design and Landmarks Committee, or the DLC. So those are removed since the DLC no longer exists. Are there any questions about sort of those blanket amendments? Okay. Right. Title 17, there's a few things that we're proposing to do here. We're adding the term or designee in various sections throughout Title 17 for signing authority. Right now, it's just the city engineer who has that signing authority or decision-making authority, and we discussed it with them, and they wanted to be able to add or designee so that the assistant city engineer still had the ability to sign final plats, for example, for projects that they were reviewing. So it broadens the signing authority for various things within the code. We've added some language related to compliance with the Oregon Residential Specialty Code for middle housing that's constructed where a middle housing land division has been approved. Recent state law has allowed middle housing land divisions to be submitted before, during, or after building permits. That was not the case during the original SB 8 language. So we wanted to make that clarification so that it was clear in the code that building permits could be submitted basically at any point during the land division process for middle housing. We are proposing to revise the specific plat notations on middle housing land divisions for compliance with the county surveyor. So we have sent, I think we're up to 14 or 15 middle housing land divisions this year. So a lot of them happening. And there was very specific language within the original SB 8 as far as notations that were to be on plats or as conditions. And when the county surveyor has been reviewing final plats, they've sent back comments that there are a couple of things that they would prefer not to see on the plat, but we can still include as conditions within the middle housing land division approval. So it's things that talk about that that any of the lots created under the middle housing land division can never be further subdivided. You can't, or the county surveyor would rather not see things that sort of lock a plat into place because we don't know what's going to happen over time. But that's still a condition of approval as part of our land use review process for the plat. So we wanted to make sure that the plat notation section within the code reflected what the county surveyor wants to see on the plats. It reduces a lot of back and forth with folks that are applying and putting those notes on their draft plats. And finally, we've made some revisions in a couple different sections of the code, both in Title 17 and then again in Title 1000 as well, that removes the Type 2 review process for middle housing land divisions. Again, reflecting state law that middle housing land divisions are reviewed as expedited land divisions, and there is not a Type 2 review process. It's a separate process specific to middle housing land divisions. So we took that language out of Title 17. Are there any questions about land division codes? Any questions I can answer about what a middle housing land division is? I realize I just kind of barreled in without that one clear. Okay. There are a few definitions that we clarified. And again, some of these clarifications are coming from us, reviewing or answering questions for the public, and we're realizing we can do a little bit more wordsmithing here to make them clearer for folks. So we revised the definition of lot coverage to clarify that covered decks are included in the calculation. The language wasn't clear about that. So we wanted to make sure that that was in the official definition. We're proposing to revise the definition of front lot line to provide clarification for corner lots and back lots, because it wasn't clear where the front lot line was for those different kinds of lots. We added some some verbiage there to make that clear. And we revised the definition of cottage cluster to include both attached and detached cottages. That was found in the cottage cluster section of the code in 505, but the definition in the definition section didn't include the attached piece of it. So we're trying to make sure that we're consistent in our language throughout the code. Any questions about the definitions from anybody? No. Okay. This may or may not be actual housekeeping code. I think it might be a little bit more than housekeeping, but I wanted to propose this because I think this is something that we should talk about and entertain. So sections 301 and 302, that's our or our moderate density residential zone and our high density residential zone, have specific street yard setbacks for townhouses. And the street yard setbacks are either 15 or 20 feet. We effectively use the street yard setback as kind of like another front yard for corner lots. The proposal is to reduce the street yard setback to a side yard setback, which is 5 feet for townhouse development. And the rationale behind this proposal is that it's reducing barriers to development of townhouses on corner lots, but more specifically because we have a lot of underlying lot lines that have already been platted as townhouse lots, particularly within the Hector Campbell neighborhood. And that little screenshot there, you can see those dotted lines are underlying lots that are 25 by 100 feet. So it's sort of set up for a townhouse development, even though we didn't really allow townhouse or row house development as easily, but we have all these underlying platted lots. The result of what this would do would be to allow for 4 townhouses to be built by reestablishing those underlying lot lines. When we maintain that street yard side yard setback, we effectively eliminate one of those townhouse lots because of the depth of that street side yard setback. The pictures that you see on the slide, the lower one is the townhouse development that's at Jackson and 52nd. So that's our first townhouse development. And you can see kind of from the street view anyway, that there's a pretty large side yard setback. That's the front of the building that you see there. And you can kind of see where that landscaping is. That's the street side yard setback. This development actually asked for a type 2 variance to reduce that side yard setback to make it a little bit smaller than the 20 feet that was required. So it is 15 feet in this picture. The upper photo is a townhouse development, actually in Portland. It's right off of Duke Street, actually. But I wanted you to be able to see sort of visually what that 5 yard setback would look like against the sidewalk. Because that's the idea of the street side yard setback is sort of what's that relationship to the building and to the street or to that public realm. And so you can see that there's a sidewalk, there's a fence, 5 feet, and then there's the building. So to be able to kind of understand that relationship. But again, the proposal is intended to be specifically for townhouses and for these corner lots and to treat that street side yard setback as a side yard. As opposed to that full street side yard setback. Not all townhouse lots are these underlying platted lots, of course, but we do have a lot of them, and we have found developers kind of trying, can I just reestablish these and build this? And they can, but they end up effectively losing a lot. And we thought that with townhouse development, which is generally going to be ownership housing because they are already on their own lots, it's not a middle housing land division. It's sort of, they're attached single homes effectively. And we thought this was something that was worth bringing up to see if it's something that the Planning Commission would like to entertain. And certainly as far as the whole package goes, I'd like to entertain any questions or if there is any discussion and see what you think. Any questions?
Yeah, thanks for bringing this one up, Vera. I know that you and I have discussed this specifically in terms of the restrictions, that this really puts on a standard 50 by 100 lot and being able to develop it with townhomes. that we end up with, under the current code, unless you get a variance, you end up with only two very skinny, townhomes, because you have to, build within that envelope that's, so small. So I just was wondering if you wanted to talk a little bit more about the dimensional restrictions and how, it really is, this really is a problem when trying to do a townhouse style development. And I just want to make sure that we're really clear about how much of a problem it really is. So I didn't know if you wanted to talk about that a little bit more.
Yeah, I'm happy to elaborate on the typical townhouse lot would be 25 by 100. So a 25 foot wide unit, 100 feet deep. Again, like these underlying platted lots that we see throughout town. So if you had a 50 by 100 property, or even one that has the 4 across, if you have a street side yard setback of 15 or 20 feet, that building can't be closer than the 15 or the 20 feet. So you're losing one of those lots, or we're sort of trying to massage the other lot lines. Now we're in a replat situation for these underlying lots, but we're likely only to have 3 townhouses instead of 4. Because townhouses are so narrow generally to begin with, the street side yard setback effectively will eliminate one of those townhouses from any one of these corner lot developments. I hope that covers what you wanted me to cover, Joseph, or Chair Edge, sorry. I'm happy to elaborate if you need me to.
No, I think that's fine. And I mean, obviously the rest of the commissioners are welcome to ask questions as well. I just wanted to make sure that we, really kind of hammered the point home of, how restrictive this really is on these, standard, older platted corner lots. So thank you for your explanation. Any other questions about this or anything else that Vera's covered so far?
I have one.
Just while we're paused. Go ahead.
Yes. What are the other design, or are there other design requirements for these side portions of the townhouse that are facing the minimal side yard? I'm just thinking to avoid, a blank wall for 30 feet or however many feet.
Great question. So our design standards for townhouses and for singles to quadplexes are applied to any street-facing facade, and that includes the side yard or the street side yard. The only difference is that we don't require you to have a front door, obviously, on the street side yard, but to your point, minimum glazing of 15% is required. We do have, and so to be fair, the photograph of the development from Portland actually would not meet our design standards because we have articulation standards. The same list where you need to choose 5 of the 17 design elements for the street-facing facade, or for the street-facing facade, also applies to the side yard or the street side yard. So there are articulation standards. In fact, and that generally ends up being so you have a change in the roof line or in the wall plane itself. So what you would not see, so this may or may not, actually, I'm not even sure if it meets the 15% glazing standard, the Portland example. But for our code, we apply all those same standards from the front of the house to that street side yard as well. So it would be closer, but we would still have all of those design elements would need to be reflected on that street side yard.
Perfect, thank you.
Any other questions for Vera before we move on?
Yeah, I have one real quick. That setback is, regardless of utilities or fire code or anything like that, correct? The updated distance, that is.
Yes, I mean, if there were utilities required or anything like that would, generally, that's in addition to the 5-foot setback, but it is from the property line. So you may have a side, the sidewalk, the utilities may be in the right of way. So that would be outside of that, out of that 5-foot setback.
Perfect, thank you.
Last chance. All right, go ahead, Vera.
Okay, and we can always circle back during your deliberation, or any other clarifications if they come up. Okay, Moving on, staying in the moderate and high-density residential zones, there are some conflicting language because we used to allow very specific lot coverage bonuses just for duplexes. That's when we only allowed duplexes sometimes and mostly single detached homes. So again, trying to clean up that language. So we removed that language that was specific to duplexes because there are lot coverage bonuses that cover middle housing and single detached units. And then similarly, we revised language for the accessory dwelling units to apply to both attached and detached ADUs. We have lot coverage allowances for ADUs, but we did not include both types. So we wanted to make sure that that was clear within the code. Okay. Couple things talk about in the Willamette Greenway, the overlay in 19.401. We're revising the list of activities that are exempt from the Willamette Greenway review to clarify the maximum size of an accessory structure. That reflects the building code. And the type A residential accessory structures that we have. So there was, it was tied too much to just residential activities, but there are accessory structures that are permitted on commercial and industrial properties as well. And that wasn't reflected in that exempt list within the Greenway. And in 19.502, that's our accessory structures section. We are revising the language just to clarify that the applicability of the code is for perimeter fences and the maximum height. It doesn't talk about the word perimeter is not in there. And so we've had folks that want to just fence something in on the interior of their property. And I'm like, oh, well, yeah, you can do that because we're really more worried about the perimeter fences around the property line. So we wanted to make that clear within the code. That's how we've been interpreting it anyway. So we wanted to make sure that the words matched our actions when it came to questions from folks. Okay. In 19.504 in the site design standards, we talk about flag lots and back lots. And when we made some amendments to the flag lot code section, we didn't kind of complete the math on the language. We're reducing the minimum width of an individual driveway or an access way for 2 or more flag lots from 15 feet to 10 feet. And the reason for that is because the minimum combined driveway width is already 25 feet, so it can't be 15 feet on any one individual lot. So the math didn't match. If it can be 25, then it can also be 30. So we just wanted to make sure that the math matched for how we were talking about that. Okay. We've made several changes to the building design standards section 19.505.1, and this is related to single detached dwellings and plexes. So that whole section. We wanted to revise and clarify how the standards apply for expansions to street-facing facades. So when folks build an addition, and so we wanted to make sure that about the applicability of the eyes on the street standard. So that's that minimum glazing standard. We wanted to make sure that it was clear about, you know, when you are adding street-facing facade, how does that standard apply to the entire facade? We also want to clarify the applicability of the minimum base zone setbacks and the building separation requirements when you convert an existing accessory structure into a plex unit. We already have language like this when you convert an accessory structure into an ADU, but we didn't have similar language for when you convert that same structure and want to call it a plex instead. We're still sort of burdened by all this vocabulary. Different things have different words for everything. We're not just about numbers of units. Some things are ADUs, some things are plexes or duplexes, and so we need to make sure that we're consistent across the board with the language. And then finally, we have language in the code that talks about pedestrian circulation, sustainability, and recycling and trash collection areas, but just for plexes. And we've been advised by the state, by HAPO, that we can't have language like that just for plexes. It needs to apply to single detached dwellings as well, and we don't have that. So we're proposing to remove that language to make sure that we are consistent across the board, that if we're asking it of single detached, then that's all we can ask of the plex development or the middle housing development as well. Okay. Any questions about that? Okay. 505.4 is the cottage cluster design and development standards section. We wanted to clarify that because we do allow, or we have always allowed attached cottages. The state now requires allowing attached cottages, but we wanted to clarify that cottages have to be, that are attached, are side by side. They're not stacked. Just wanted to make that crystal clear that that's how those cottages need to work. And then again, we were also wanting to remove and clarify language regarding related to attached garages. It's always been, or our code has always talked about cottage clusters as not having also attached garages because they're cottages. So we wanted to make sure there were a couple of phrases or bullet points within that section that seemed to imply that they were allowed and was causing some confusion. So we wanted to make sure that we took that out to make it very clear that attached garages are not permitted for cottages and cottage clusters.
Can we pause here really quick, Vera?
Sure.
Could we talk about the cottages being side by side or versus not stacked? I'm just kind of curious about like where at what point, or how did we infer that this is the policy, that this is consistent with the policy language that we've adopted so far? And then also, like, what are the benefits, or kind of like just really briefly pros and cons of allowing stacked cottages? I'd just like to kind of think about this for a second because this feels new to me.
Oh, sure. I think, so when we originally proposed the middle housing code back in 2022, cottages were all detached. So kind of your traditional cottage cluster development. And then I think it was maybe 18 months or 2 years, well, 18 months later, we had gotten an application or a proposal for a cottage cluster that was asking about allowing attached cottages for efficiency of design, and they were side by side kind of thing. And so we brought the idea back to both the Planning Commission and the City Council to see, well, what if we allow attached cottages as well? The square footage limitation for each individual unit would still remain because that's the idea, right? That cottages are small. And so there are all these trade-offs within their code about setbacks and the required common courtyard, et cetera, that goes with that. And so that was approved as allowing attached cottages. You ask a great question, Chair Edge. I think it was, Frank, I don't know that it ever, I'll admit, I don't know that it ever occurred to us that a cottage would be a stacked unit, that they were intended to be side by side. If they were attached, it would be side by side. Also because middle housing land division cannot be proposed on sort of on a vertical level. They need to be on stacked or unstacked units. That's the only way to do a middle housing land division or land division of any kind. You can't divide a unit sort of in half vertically. So not that every cottage cluster is proposed to have a middle housing land division, but that was also part of it. But because cottages were always originally intended to be detached units and then the attached through the state, I guess I don't know that we ever talked specifically about them being stacked as attached, but it wasn't our intent to allow for stacked attached cottages. It seems to go, I think, against sort of what we understand a cottage to be. But I'm open to having this conversation with the Planning Commission if that's what everyone would like to talk about as far as, because we do allow cottages to be 2 stories as an individual unit, certainly. But generally, we've always understood cottages to be either detached or attached side by side so that they are more cottage-like, I suppose, in that respect, as opposed to more of a kind of a multi-unit kind of situation. But happy to have the conversation, certainly.
Yeah, I mean, this feels like, it kind of feels like a bigger conversation that could, spiral out of scope, really quickly. But, what I'm thinking, what intuitively just comes to mind, and you're absolutely correct, like, we just haven't discussed it. I think that it was, we were trying to keep them even, separated, like you were saying to begin with. And so I agree that this wasn't really conceptually something that we were thinking about. But now that you have the concept of, attached cottages, then, it just kind of bears the question of considering this particular format. I understand about the land divisions, and I realize that that's, obviously that's still a thing right now where you can't, do vertical divisions like that for ownership units. But what I'm thinking of is that, when you have a cottage and you have a particular building footprint, and say that you want that to be an accessible unit for somebody, the upstairs becomes useless, and under that, you know what I mean? It's like, maybe not useless in all cases, but if you have a unit that an individual person occupies and they need that to be accessible, then, maybe it is, not a bad design to allow having, discrete, separate units stacked on top of each other, within that building footprint, allowing for the smaller units, just like we're talking about the cottages are supposed to be, still meeting the dimensional standards. But the upstairs unit is, obviously accessed by a stairway and is, relatively compact. And then the downstairs unit is, perhaps maybe that's the requirement, is that it be an accessible unit with accessible features. I'm not sure. In order to, you know what I mean? It's like, but that's what I'm thinking of, is it's like just being able to provide that format in a cottage cluster and still allow for the efficiency of getting an occupiable top floor in that same format while getting accessible units. So that's what I'm thinking of. I'm interested in hearing feedback from staff and the rest of the commission, but I understand that this might be out of scope for what we're talking about, and that might be kind of what I want to hear from you, Vera. So does anyone have any thoughts on that?
Just a few thoughts. I think, looking back at the intent of what the cottage cluster feel would present versus, like a duplex, like a traditional duplex. I think part of why I like the that there are fewer restrictions on the cottage cluster is because they do have this expectation of being having that different feel. Like other requirements may be lessened for the cottage cluster in general that I think are acceptable because it has this it's a more human scale. So I feel like when you start stacking units, you blend the lines between cottage cluster and just like a traditional duplex, which, in my opinion, should have different requirements. From what I've seen developed in the units too, the ones that have been physically constructed, I think when I pass the units that are one story or have more of the individual cottage feel, that is more what I was expecting them to look like. So I'm not entirely opposed to stacked, but I feel like once you start stacking them, you are looking at a different property type. It's just something to consider. So it may be a better discussion to have at another time to have a deeper discussion on that, but I'm not completely opposed to it. It's just my intent when I think of cottage cluster is not to see units stacked.
Thank you for that, Vice Chair. Any other comments from commissioners?
Yeah, I think it certainly blurs the line as you were saying there, and I think we could probably spend an hour on this. I would love to spend an hour on this. I think maybe at some point. Maybe we need to focus the conversation tonight, but. I think when we think about promoting the density, promoting affordable housing, a stacked cottage cluster probably makes sense, especially when we're looking at a cottage cluster that's going to be rented or intended for rental use and not for individual home ownership of the occupants. And so, yeah, I think that there's a place for them, but how we execute on that, I'm not entirely sure. And I think that we'd have to look into that because I think there is room in the market for, smaller micro type units and maybe a cluster or a cottage that is almost like a studio apartment in a sense. And so thinking of it in that sense, you're still not going to get the footprint of a traditional duplex if it's stacked. But yeah, I think we could probably spend quite a bit of time on it.
Chair?
Anybody else?
Yeah, I think blurring the lines seems to be the buzzword of the conversation, but my primary hangup is this idea of the division of the land and thinking of cottage clusters primarily as an affordable entry point to home ownership, and really wanting to leverage that. So if we are thinking about stacked clusters, if that dissuades home ownership in clusters, then I think that's something I'm hesitant about. But yeah, as Commissioner has said, I think we could talk about this for hours and potentially a conversation for another time.
Yeah, thank you, Commissioner Pennick. Any other comments?
Yeah, thank you, Chair Edge. I kind of agree with the idea of having the cottage cluster. I mean, like Commissioner Graytrick was saying, I have a clear understanding of kind of what that is, and especially if there tend to be a two-story unit, obviously, or a two-story cottage, that would eliminate that stackable idea anyways. I kind of think that it would, for me at least, I would not want to buy anything that would be stacked like that. I kind of like the idea of I like the look of the cottage clusters kind of as they are kind of now. But yeah, it would certainly be we could certainly discuss it further for sure. But that would just be my initial thoughts on that. Thank you.
Thank you.
Chair Edge, if I could, given that there's a lot more to talk about here, I think, and this hearing is a recommendation to City Council. So certainly if there is more that the commission wants to understand about this or, and so on, I think that can be crafted within the recommendation to City Council as well. And even if this particular piece of language kind of gets pulled from this and we can circle back on this, and we can add this piece, of code to, there's going to be another code amendment package coming in a couple of months, calling it policy light. This feels like light policy probably. So, we can certainly, make that, you could make that as part, or the commission can make that as part of your recommendation when you get into deliberations and talk through how you want to sort of package the recommendation going to City Council as well. We can come back with more information or do some more research on it. So happy to do that as well. Whatever makes you more comfortable moving this forward.
Yeah, thank you, Vera, and thank you to the commissioners for adding their comments. Hopefully, I wanted to make sure Commissioner Steer had the opportunity to add his comments as well, if interested. Not trying to cut anybody off.
No, I had nothing further to add. I agree that the idea of taking it vertical does limit the original purpose of entry-level home ownership, I think, and the appeal of the land division. But again, I think that's a much bigger discussion for a later time.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, that seems to be the consensus. And I'm on board with that as well. I think that, this does feel more policy heavy than what we're trying to do here tonight. What I'm interested in, and kind of like what you said, Vera, earlier about, adding notes to the plat, with the idea that, yeah, that's the standard now, but it might change. That's kind of my thinking around, how we're currently dealing with, the land divisions and ownership, and that right now it's it is, very much, you need a footprint on the ground, but, there is also the concept of, condoification, or whatever, where, you can have ownership in, a building that has, multiple stories, and you own a flat in that. So, there are different ownership models, and I wonder, I'm thinking that the direction of the state is to try to, expand that. And so hopefully there will just be more opportunities in the future to, provide more ownership opportunities for more formats of housing and structures. But yeah, this doesn't really gain us any benefit right now to that end, which really does seem to be a priority of the commissions for, the cottage cluster format. So I'm content just leaving it alone for now. And when we do come back with a more policy heavy, maybe this is something that, staff can explore in the meantime, but, and bring back if you're interested, or if there's something, interesting there to talk about in the next code amendments package. But I'm content to drop it for now. So thank you.
Okay.
Just before we move on to another topic, can we go back to the sustainability piece that was removed? Can you repeat that the state is not requiring it and that's why we're removing it? Or what's the reasoning behind it?
When the middle housing code, when all of that, House Bill 2001, the legislation came through, the policy and the way the legislation is written is that we cannot require of middle housing anything different than we do for single detached dwellings. And so the sustainability requirements, the pedestrian circulation, that was all intended to address a multi-unit, not official multi-unit, but a property that had multiple units on it. So it seemed, we thought, reasonable to think about how is pedestrian circulation working on a property that has 3 or 4 houses on it. However, we've been advised that we can't enforce that language because we don't require the same things of a single detached dwelling. We don't require a single detached dwelling project to tell us where are your recycling bins, where, all that kind of thing. Even though when you have multiple units, it seems like a reasonable thing to ask to kind of figure out how that's going to work. But we can't require that in the code. So that's why we needed to remove it from the Plex development review, because we don't have the same thing in single detached dwellings.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
Is that something that we cannot require of a single detached dwelling?
I guess no. I suppose we could. However, I just want to, there are still, there was a whole package of legislation that came through the last 6 months or so. There's still a lot of rulemaking that's coming through. So to the extent that, and I absolutely understand the question, Chair Edge, I think anything kind of more significant, I think in the direction that you're going is something that I would prefer to wait on until we have the final rulemaking from DLCD and from LCDC to make sure that we're not making code amendments now that we're not going to be allowed to do, and we're going to have to revise again until we get all that rulemaking out of the way for a clear direction.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense. I appreciate the clarification. Thank you.
Just perhaps something to earmark though, to circle back on.
No, that makes sense. Okay. All right. Moving on to, we have language related to non-residential development. So this is mixed use development and commercial development. I missed it in the find and replace of row houses and townhouses. So probably going to keep doing this while I still work here. We wanted to make sure that it was clarified that any development within the downtown mixed use zone is subject to the downtown mixed use code. It just wanted to make sure that the non-residential development code section does not apply to the downtown because we have a completely separate code for that. We're proposing some amendments to manufactured dwellings, both in 19.506 and in 910.3. This reflects language that was in conflict with state law. There was quite a few amendments made in state law related to manufactured housing parks. And so and it basically stripped out some of the language that we still had in there. We had clarified some of this a few years ago, but then some additional amendments were made, again, making sure that manufactured dwellings weren't being treated differently than other housing types. So we wanted to pull some of that language out of there and make sure that we were in compliance with state law. And we are making a small adjustment to the home occupations code section, just clarifying that the owner or the operator would be allowed to be the person who can submit for a home occupation for a short-term rental. It's not always the property owner. It could be the person who lives there. That's between them and their landlord, of course. But it was making sure that we were acknowledging that it could be the person who lives there is also, could be running the home occupation on the property. And this had come up in a couple of folks that were proposing short-term rentals, so we wanted to make sure that the code was clear on that. Any questions on this slide? Okay. Nearly done. We made some amendments to the wireless communication facilities section. We revised the list, we're proposing to revise the list of exempt facilities per FCC law, which isn't always super clear, but basically per the FCC, more and more wireless communication facilities need to be exempt from land use review. We're still allowed to review new monopoles, but it's starting to get, the list is getting shorter and shorter about what we can actually review and pull through land use review. We also added standards for small cell facilities. We haven't had, our code did not have any requirements for small cell facilities in the right of way. Those are the sort of the dorm fridge looking things that are attached to poles within the right of way. We didn't have any standards for that at all. So we wanted to reflect FCC standards for how they address small cell facilities, as well as we have some standards already in our public works standards, but we didn't have them carried over into our 904 section of the code. So we wanted to make sure that those were speaking in the same language going forward. Related to accessory dwelling units or ADUs, we wanted to clarify the applicability of standards for standalone ADUs and structures that contain ADUs. We're seeing more and more folks proposing sort of a detached garage with the ADU above. And our code wasn't clear on which standards to apply in that case, given our sort of general, I think, city policy to encourage residential development. We've been interpreting that to, if it has an ADU, those are the standards that we're using. We want to make sure that we're not sort of trying to split up, well, it's an accessory structure, is it an ADU? We're proposing code that it's all strictly within the ADU code that we're talking about. And then we wanted to clarify the language for an increase in the size of an ADU to reflect, we already have existing language in our variance code and our type 2 variance code in 19.911 that allows for a 25% increase in the square footage of an ADU, and we wanted to make sure that that was also within the ADU section of the code too. It's a little bit redundant, but we wanted to make sure that it was clear that you could in fact increase the ADU size via type 2 variance.
I just want to make sure I didn't get lost there. So you're saying even if an accessory structure is involved, if there's an ADU, then the ADU standards are going to apply. Okay.
That's what we're proposing,
okay.
Correct?
Okay.
Yes. It still would apply that the structure footprint is still limited, the size of the ADU is still limited, but it mostly has to do with setbacks and trying to figure, because some, an 800, for example, an 800 square foot garage that has an ADU above it in the accessory structures code has a rear yard setback of 20 feet. But an ADU of that size would only be 5 feet. So what we're reflecting is that there's an ADU as part of the structure. We are considering this an ADU. And so it still has the same limitations on size and height. But it's effectively, really the setbacks are kind of the most significant piece of that to be able to reflect that. But that's the intent, that we're using only the ADU code to apply to that structure. Yeah, okay, thank you.
If we have a detached garage with an ADU above it, is the ADU second story limited to 800 square feet? Or if it's, you know, on the side of the garage, does that garage area floor, is that included in the 800?
The structure footprint, so the overall structure
Mhm.
is limited to 800 square feet without a variance, but limited to 800 square feet. The ADU itself, square footage is also limited to 800 square feet. So you could still have a two-story garage that is, or a two-story structure, 800 square foot garage on the first floor, 800 square foot ADU above. So
Okay.
that would still count, but yes, but that 800 square feet is kind of the magic number for the size, both the square footage of the ADU and the square footage of the footprint of the structure itself.
Can you have a detached garage that's greater than 800 square feet on its own?
You can, but it has to meet the setback standards and so on within the accessory structures code. So if it's over 600, if it's over 600 square feet, so an 800 square foot would need to meet the base zone standards. And for the most part, it's the rear yard setback that is greater for that. So we're sort of rewarding a structure by having a dwelling unit in it, I guess is one way to think about it,
Yeah.
is under the proposal that we're.
Okay. I'm thinking of if we have a detached garage with the setbacks that are required, that say it's 1,000 square foot garage and someone wants to put an ADU above it, would they have to limit their size to 800 square feet?
They would, if they were, so a couple scenarios, they could convert the garage into an ADU. We allow for conversions of existing accessory structures into ADUs, and we don't require a variance for that, because if you are, but you can't, there's a time limit, so it has to be an accessory structure that has been built within a certain time. It's not build a garage one day, come back 6 months later and convert it into an ADU. It's kind of get around it. So we recognize that, but we recognize that there are existing accessory structures there that people want to convert into ADUs, and we let them do that without a variance if it was an existing structure. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, and that actually concludes the package or the discussion in the presentation. So again, our recommendation is that the planning commission recommend that the council approve the package of code amendments. Happy to answer any questions before you enter deliberations. Thank you.
Thank you, Vera. Are there any, I know we asked questions as we went, but are there any clarifying questions for staff from the commissioners?
One more question from me. On the signing designation authority, is that limited to the city engineer or, sorry, assistant city engineer, or can that be delegated to anyone?
The intent was for the assistant city engineer, but it's specifically called out as for designee so that the city engineer could designate someone else, for example, the city manager or someone else to have their signing authority for a certain project or for a certain document. So it's intended to be broad in language so that the city engineer does have the ability to delegate that to someone that they believe has the ability to sign those documents, but it gives them a little bit more flexibility on who can do it.
Okay,
Yeah.
thank you.
Any other questions for Vera? Okay, thank you very much. Have we received any correspondence on this matter other than those items included in the meeting packet?
We have not, no.
Okay, and again, any audience?
Still no audience, no.
Okay, then we'll move on past that. I will close the public testimony portion of this hearing. So let's see, public testimony portion of the hearing on the Type 5 application for code amendments filed ZA-2025-004 is now closed. There's the gavel, all right. Is the commission ready for discussion?
We are.
Okay. Who would like to lead us off?
Happy to share a
Sure.
few. I'm sorry. Thank you very much.
I thought you come off mute. Yeah, go for it.
Yeah, just wanted to share a couple of thoughts. First of all, Vera, thank you very much for that explanation. I know it was a lot to share with us. I really appreciate it. You did a really good job of explaining why and what the ramifications are. I very much appreciate that. I agree that most of these are very much just kind of cleaning house. There's a little bit of language in there that's slightly beyond it, but I'm very comfortable with it. And overall, I'm very comfortable with approving these proposed amendments and recommending them to City Council. Specifically, things I like, I really like in the the 19301.4 3012 for where we talk about the street yard setbacks for townhouses. If you had talked to me 15 years ago, I had a very different perspective on setbacks, and it's changed a lot over the past few years. Primarily, I like the idea of seeing land be used appropriately, and I like the idea of seeing us get more units. And I think specifically folks who have street-facing lots or corner lots are particularly affected. And so I think this allows for more housing to get developed, less land kind of getting stuck in the middle of the developments in strips that aren't really getting utilized. And also we have our articulation standards, and particularly when you showed the example that was up there, I think, that shows you the part that stands out to us. It's 5 feet versus 15 feet, it does make a difference visually, but it's how well articulated the wall is that's really going to stand out to us. So I'm comfortable with that. I was also very happy to see, it's kind of random, but I was very happy to see the standards for wireless communication facilities being revised and updated. In my world, I do a lot of permitting for large industrial and commercial clients. I can tell you that this is one of the biggest changing sectors that I have been involved in recently, and seeing FCC requirements and just a goal for streamlining review, making things more affordable, helping people update, to get utilities up to standards is the most important thing right now. So I was very happy to see that as well. So I do think there are some things that were discussed here that, as you've mentioned, there's going to be additional discussions later for more substantive changes. I think we've kind of laid the groundwork for discussing some of those potentially. But with this specific package of amendments, I'm very comfortable with what's being proposed.
Excellent. Thank you, Vice Chair. Would another commissioner like to take the floor and add their comments?
I'd like to echo much of what Commissioner Graycheck has already said. I think I am in support of everything that we've discussed tonight. And I do think what stands out most is the change in setback to the townhomes. I think that's a real highlight and something that I think will make a big impact on middle housing in Milwaukee. I do think that we might want to consider pulling that line about clusters for future conversation before it goes to council, or sending it to council with the understanding that planning commission is divided, undecided. But other than that, yes, I'm very happy with these updates, and thank you very much for the presentation.
Thank you, Commissioner Fennick. Any other comments from the commission?
Thank you, Vera and staff, for the preparation here tonight, and all of your word search capabilities here to update our code and bring it up to the standard we're looking for. I appreciate the efficiency with the the signing authority, being able to be delegated, I know that that can be a real headache. Whether you're a developer or anyone else trying to do business with the city. That's great. Also with the side yard reduction for the townhomes, I think that that is really going to be beneficial and drive some further development in our city. Like Commissioner Graytrick said, you know, I think from a design element perspective, ensuring that that street facing facade design still applies on the side street is really important. I was not too excited to see that Duke example. I'm going to take your word that our design criteria is going to provide a better result than what we're seeing there in that Portland example. Yeah. I think a further discussion on the cottage cluster stackability would be interesting. I think there's more to explore there. I think on the sustainability side as well, you know, there's language that was removed talking about the orientation of roofs to provide the potential for solar in the future. I think that is something that could potentially be looked at for new build single family homes and could be applicable across the board. I think we need to be, there's kind of a balance there where we look to meet our climate goals and we look to not overburden developers with additional cost or criteria in that sense. So I don't know what the answer is, but that should be looked at. And then there was some discussion also about operable windows in there, which I don't see why we wouldn't want operable windows or have any sort of restriction on that. So I think as the code is proposed currently, I'm comfortable with proposing it. And yeah, I think we just have a couple of things to discuss in the future and earmark, as we said. But yeah, I'm happy with where things are at. And yeah, thank you for the proposal here tonight.
Thank you, Commissioner Hess.
I'll chime in.
Other commissioners? Yeah, please.
I'll chime in to second everybody else here. The proposed package looks good to me. The verbiage that we're changing seems necessary and just meeting standards. I look forward to the future discussions, not only on the sustainability side, but also on the orientation of the cottages, and look forward to that. So I'm happy and comfortable putting forward that package to City Council. And that's all I have to say. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you, Commissioner Steer. And Commissioner Lowther, did you get a chance to speak? I don't think so.
No, thank you, Chair. I would just say, yeah, I kind of agree. I think a lot of this is just housekeeping in general. Again, like with everybody, I think the setback is a bigger issue. I personally like to see more of a setback than 5 feet, but I understand in the need for that to be 5 feet based on lot sizes. However, I guess if my opinion would be if the lot was bigger than, say, the 50 by 100, I would like to see that setback increased a little bit. But I understand on the narrow 50 by 100, that 5 feet, you know, to get two townhouses out of that, or, you know, dividing that lot, I see that's necessary to have the 5 feet. But ultimately, I would like a bigger setback. But I'm not gonna hold anything up because of that. And then, yeah, I think the cottage cluster discussion would be good to kind of hold off on. And I don't know if that would, yeah, I think that would be good for me. So yeah, I think everything else is, I'm totally fine with that. So yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Lowther. So it sounds to me like we're comfortable with the package the way that it is. And that even though we want to have a conversation about the cottage cluster stackability, perhaps in the future, and maybe a couple of these other topics, that we're comfortable putting forward the package of amendments as proposed, is what I'm hearing. Anyone who disagrees with that, feel free to chime in. But I'm going to add just a couple of my own comments really quick. Everybody has basically said things that reflect, you know, what I feel and my own opinions. And And I'm going to talk just a little bit more about the townhouse setback, side yard setback. This is something I've really actually been obsessing over for years. And so it feels so wonky to me, but this has really been something that, a standard that I've been targeting for a long time, as like, does this make sense? And what are the alternatives to, to being able to do townhouses when you want to do, if that's the format you want to do, how do we allow you to do that, without needing to do, like Vera was saying, do replats and all these, kind of procedural gymnastics. You own a lot. It should be easy to divide, particularly when it has historic plat lines, already drawn out, per state law, we have to allow those. So, I'm really glad to see the support for the revision of this standard, both from staff and from the commission. I really appreciate that. It feels so wonky to me, just policy heavy, but it's important. I'm glad that we all, we all see, why it's important. And so thank you to everybody for, giving this, objective consideration and, sharing your thoughts on it. It felt like the kind of thing to me that could just fly right under the radar because it's so, like I said, it's just so kind of wonky, but it's something that I've been excited about, and I'm glad to see the proposal here, and I'm super happy to be recommending this specific change in this package. So thanks to everybody for making this possible. Everything else looks great to me. I'm happy. I'm happy to see it. I'm happy to have a discussion in the future about cottage cluster, efficiency, and that's fine to leave it the way it is now. So again, I think at this point, I'm ready to take a motion.
I'll motion to approve the Type 5 code amendments as they're recommended by staff.
And I will.
Thank you. We have a motion. A second. Did I hear a second?
Yes, I second.
Perfect. Thank you. So we have a motion and a second. Is there any further discussion before we poll the commission for their votes? Okay. Vera, would you mind polling the commissioners for their votes?
I'd be happy to. Okay. Vice Chair Graytrick,
Aye.
Commissioner Hess,
Aye.
Commissioner Lowther,
Aye.
Commissioner Pennick,
Aye.
Commissioner Sherman. Oh, sorry. Commissioner Sherman's not here. Commissioner Steer
Aye.
and Chair Edge.
Aye.
Motion passes 6.
Motion passes. Application ZA-2025-004 is approved unanimously. The decision is a recommendation to the City Council, which will make the final decision after a public hearing. Please see planning staff for details concerning the City Council hearing date and process. So thank you, everybody. At this point of the agenda, the Commission will act as the Community Involvement Advisory Committee. Do staff or CIAC members have any items to report?
Staff does not.
Any members of the Commission wish to report on anything CIAC related? Okay. No audience still, Vera?
Still no audience, no.
Okay, then we are done with that. All right, do the commissioners have any other items for discussion? Okay, then I guess we are on to the forecast. Vera?
We have no items for the week of the holiday. For December 23rd, there are no items, and we're past the point of someone being able to submit an application. So you have December 23rd off. At this point, we don't have any items scheduled for January 13th, but we haven't officially canceled that meeting yet. So keep it on your calendar, please. But we will let you know certainly when that opens up. And January 27th, we have a tentative hearing to adopt the transportation system plan. So very exciting. So hopefully that's all in the works. And so we will have an adoption hearing on January 27th with Laura and with Ryan on that one as well. So that's what we have so far.
Would it be too much to put you on the spot to ask about a forecast just kind of for next year, since this is our last meeting of the year? Like what do we expect your department to be working on and kind of bringing forward to us code amendment wise next year?
Yeah, so from a code amendment standpoint, we are in the early stages of, well, we have a huge code fix list spreadsheet. And so the housekeeping piece is one part of it. We've identified a variety of things that we're calling policy light. So that package of amendments will be coming to you probably in the late winter, early spring, we think. Ryan Dyer is working on that package, will be working on that package. Parallel with that, or sort of parallel with that, we are looking at code amendments related to private streets, but we're likely to have something more like a work session with you all first before we really dive into the code. But with middle housing development and a lot of the configurations of a lot of our properties and lots here in the city, it's been talked about to kind of think about, is there an opportunity for a private street kind of development pattern as opposed to public right of way and accepted public streets. So we're still in sort of the early stages of researching that and what that means, because right now we don't have anything that kind of relates to private streets, but for basic sort of design considerations. But the part that sort of involves the development side of things is that development is intended or is required to face, for residential development, to face the street, the public right of way. So if you have a long, deep lot, a private street doesn't get you sort of your traditional front yard sort of facing the road because it's not public right of way. So some developers, so it's been a challenge generally for, so we're still, we're looking at some other communities' codes and trying to see what does that mean for us? Is that something we want to pursue? So so Ryan is doing some initial research on that to kind of, and again, bringing that to you as a work session item before we kind of really get into the code piece of it to try to identify sort of pros and cons and kind of unintended consequences and all of that to see if it's something that we want to pursue here. So those are sort of the two kind of immediate sort of code amendment packages. You may have, if you were watching any of the city council work sessions and so on, with Laura and with our housing production strategy, we'll be working on a project related to our high density residential zone. One of our requirements within the HPS is to build capacity for additional housing development. Our high density residential zone is generally underbuilt for what the density allowances are in the high density residential zone. So we received a grant from DLCD to engage with a consultant to help us work through that process. So we don't even have a final scope yet at this point, but there are likely code and map amendments that will be coming to more towards sort of this time next year or sort of towards the end of 2026. There's a big engagement process that will be part of that as well, but likely some code and map amendments coming out of that process as well. So those are a couple, three sort of headlines of code amendments that we think will likely be coming so far. We're still working out the work plan for the next couple, 3 years. And there's always the state stuff that's happening, the legislation. So we may be here earlier than, sooner rather than later to address some of those things as well. But that's what we have so far.
Great. Thank you for that. I really appreciate the ad hoc forecast for next year. That's great. So at this point, I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
I will move to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn. Do we have a second?
Second.
We have a second. Any last second discussion before we go?
Happy New Year.
Okay, all those in favor of adjourn? Oh wait, was there something?
Happy New Year, everyone.
Oh yeah, Happy New Year. Thank you. Great. All those in favor of adjourning, say aye.
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 Any opposed? Nope, we're good. All right. Good night, everybody. See you next year.
Aye.
Good evening.
Bye.